As we move toward the final stretch of our morning, before lunch break, we have a session that many of you will find both practical and empowering. This session brings together two critical conversations. One, GCC consulting demystified, and two, navigating GCC employment and consulting pathways. Whether you are an aspiring consultant, someone who is curious about the corporate world, or a professional looking to pivot into GCCs, this session promises to clarify, simplify, and inspire.
Now we have our eminent speaker for this session. I request CA Pramod Hegde, the Regional Council Member SIRC of ICI, to escort Smita Hemmige, MD of ANSR, and Shalini Sankarshana, MD of GCC Leader Planview India Private Limited. Let's give a big round of applause for both the speakers, Smita Hemmige and Shalini Sankarshana. Where are they? They're just coming in a way. In the meanwhile, let us listen to the introduction of the speakers. We have Smita Hemmige. Smita is a managing director of ANSR, where she orchestrates enterprise-wide growth initiatives and architects sophisticated client strategies that have positioned ANSR as an undisputed market leader in establishing and scaling GCC for Fortune 500 enterprise worldwide. Her distinguished career spans over 2 decades of progressive leadership across premier technology organizations, including ThoughtWorks, CSS Corp, Unisys, Infosys, and Logica. As a visionary marketing strategist, Smita has consistently delivered exceptional revenue growth while elevating the brand positioning and market presence for the global corporations across diverse industry verticals. Beyond her corporate achievements, Smita's commitment to advancement extends through her role as co-trustees of Baleko Trust, where she champions non-profit initiatives that create lasting community change. I now welcome Smita on the dais. She has already come. I request CA Pramod Hegde to hand over book and the momentum, which is already done. Thank you. Over to Pramod Hegde.
Well, thank you, Anil, for quickly introducing the topic. Of course, I'll not take much of your time. Just let me start with an honest confession. We are very good at, getting the filings done, filling the checklist, getting the report completed. But Word today is asking much more. What is that value addition you're creating? What is the value you're giving? And if CAs in Bangalore cannot drive the GCCs, then who else can do it? So that's the context which I want to lay down. And today's speakers are going to talk about how do we create values, both in-house organization and as a consultants, and how are we going to develop on it. And of course, for people who are practicing, I did say that the value creation is what the word is looking for. That doesn't mean in-house employees doesn't look for that. Even today, I think we should look into expanding the influence within the organization so that we are creating value within the organization. And I think we should be knowing that, I was just speaking to Smita as well, the maturity model is also advanced on the GCC. I think post-COVID, she was trying to tell me we have around 600 nano GCCs which has been set up in Bangalore. Of course, when I think yesterday Sanjeev Sagi did mention about the nano GCC, which is not that we are talking about 500 members GCC, it's about 5 people team GCC, 50 people team GCC. That's the scale which we are talking upon now. So I think I don't want to take much of the time. We would like to listen from you. Over to the speaker. Thank you. I'll be down so that you can have the entire stage for you. Before you take over, you know she is the James Bond of the GCC, so I just missed out that. No one told that, probably.
Okay, I think there's a lot of hype and everything else that's been given to me before, so thank you so much, Pramod. I can't pull out like some cool gadget. They have not given me any of that, but what I do have is cool stats about the GCC industry, and that's what answered us. We are our own queue. We've got all of the things that you need when you're in this situation to go back and build your own center. That's what we do as a business. So what I thought I'll talk to you about is broadly to context set and get everybody on the same page. When you're thinking about GCCs, what are key trends that we're talking about? That's one. And second is, can we talk about the various engagement models, implementation approaches that we have? And of course, we've got some areas where we're talking about the various consulting services that we do. When you set up a GCC, and just to put a little in context, you need about 100 odd services when you set up. And to run effectively, you need a 50 more. And that's the fancy and the cool and the James Bond stuff that we do at Answer. So to very quickly talk about, what are some key trends that we have in the GCC industry? If I go back and think about trends, what we've seen is we don't know where the GCC ends and where the enterprise begins. If I go back and put a map, think about an image where you've got left side is New York, it's got yellow color cabs, and right side is your old MG Road Boulevard. That is how the industry is becoming. Or I'll give you another example. Think about, you've got 19 floors that you've leased for your building. The 19th floor that you've recently signed the lease is not in Bangalore. It's sitting in Bangalore. It's not in New York, it's sitting in Bangalore. That is what a GCC has become today. It's integral, it's strategic, it's completely controlled by the enterprise. It's got the same culture. If you cut people, they will have the same war cry, the same hue, the same enthusiasm that you will see with an enterprise. That's what makes the GCC so unique. If I go back and think about examples, and think about Target for a minute, and it was the first GCC that we set up in India. Target has all of its functions represented in the GCC here in Bangalore. And if you go back and look at marketing, for example, as a function, think about Target. It's a company that is so all-encompassing about its brand, right? It works with so many millions of customers. About 85% of Target's marketing that happens for the US is actually built and driven and set up in a location like Bangalore. And all of their media optimization, which means on target.com, you can go and bid for, this is the location I want to go and put my ad. That platform is also built in Bangalore. So we have an SVP that's running a 1,000-member team, minus TV ads. Everything else of marketing is being built, which is so esoteric, which is so customer-facing, and which we always think needs to be sitting in headquarters, right? Functions like that is also then set up in locations like India. And that's what makes GCC so unique. And that's why these centers are being set up. Now, another trend, I think after the word cloud, transformation, the next data, the next word that's most abused is AI. And GCCs contribute effectively to this trend. In fact, 60-odd%, we did a recent survey. We surveyed about 800 of the top GCCs in India. 60% of them have their GCC POCs that are actually happening from their centers here in India. So which means all of the new cutting edge, cool areas are actually being built from here, and they're building AI COEs from here. So if I go back and think about what can be great change agents, what can really create transformation, large parts of that is actually happening from the centers here that they can find in India. And why? Because you have access to talent. You've got access to talent that sits right in the middle of business, transformation, technology. And that's why they become so important. And this talent has another key thing, like a secret sauce. They have leadership qualities. They have people that they can go back and push the envelope. They have people who, are great culture, adapters. And these are other three qualities that make the GCC talent so unique. Now, another thing that we want to talk about is GCCs for all. So which means, and post-pandemic, and especially with the push for, people to be going back and setting up, faster, quicker in terms of wanting to either move on their digital journey or transform, the entire concept of you don't have to be a Fortune 500 company or a Global 2000 company. You can be a $200 million company and set up a 20-member team in India. Now that's what's led to this whole unique concept of micro and nano GCCs. And that's what makes this model so unique. So you can set up a 20-member, high-performing crack team that can go back and help you transform. Or you've got the opportunity to go back and set up a 50,000-member team. What we've also seen is, I give you a target example. If I look at companies like Rolls-Royce, if I look at companies like Wells Fargo, they've got every part of the bank, functioning part of the bank actually set up here. So which means they're no more just about restricted to tech or low-end functions. They talk about everything that you're thinking about as multidisciplinary hubs. The overlap of technology on business functions, the overlap on corporate functions with business functions and with corporate functions have all become extremely interesting areas where they are able to symbiotically go back and deliver. And GCCs are, again, you have a GCC, it's not like you stop working with a service provider. That's why it's called best sourcing. It's about how do you go back and deliver what you'll keep in the headquarters, what you'll keep in the India center, and what will you work with your service provider to create, a journey that can truly help you transform better and make yourself a better version of yourself as the years come along. If I look at the broad GCC models today, at Answer, these are the models that we offer. We look at Greenfield GCC, which means that companies can go back and they can set up their own centers. We will work with them, and it's fully owned. Or we will do a JV where, it's between two parties. It's between Answer and our clients. They don't want to be owning the full entity, and we can transfer the entity at some point in time. Then, of course, there's a version of what we do as build, operate, transfer, unlike the service providers. Because in our version of build, operate, transfer, you will decide who will come and join you. They will be in line with your culture. They will follow your policies. If you look at them, you can't make out a difference between your team and the team that's sitting within this center, even though you don't own the entity. What happens? We've got an entity that we set up. That entity is set up for the purpose of setting up this GCC. At the end of the duration, the entity is transferred. This brings about 2-3 things, which is very unique. One, employees, when they transfer, nothing changes for them, because from day one they are part of and they're dedicated to company X, right, for the sake of ease. They will get transferred, only the back-end entity gets transferred. Nothing changes in the way the employees operate. Next, what happens is their entire benefits, PF, gratuity, years of service, there's service continuity, because the whole entity transfers and nothing changes for these organizations. And what also happens is, because there's nothing changing, there is actually very low attrition, because one of the key factors when we do build, operate, transfer is, will I use institutional knowledge? Because when I transfer, I can lose people. And when I lose people, they take away a part of the process maturity or process knowledge, which is very critical for me to go back and deliver. Now, what we also go back and do with our, when we go and set up is we follow a playbook and we use a 4-phase methodology to do this. The first, of course, is everything to do with due diligence, right? If you want to set up something, you have to go back and ask somebody for, can I build a business case? And if I'm building this business case, what does that business case look like? What all should be in my business case? What work do I want to bring here? Which location should I select? What should be the size of the team? What should the first tranche of work come here? And what will follow? So which means a demand plan needs to be built. And then, of course, do I want to be building net new capability? Do I want to insource some work? Do I want to move contractors? So you decide the operating model. And then you'll decide, where do I want to hire from? Which company do I want to hire from? Who are my peers who are going to be there? What is my ecosystem looking like? I have made investments in product and platform companies. Are they present in the same region? All of these go into the business case. It also ties back to an organizational mandate. Do I want to reduce cost? Do I want to move faster? What is the value that I want to go back and deliver? Do I want to increase my, basis points on my customer experience by moving up by about 10 or 15 basis points? So many of these are actually captured and they are part of your business case, and they become the metric that the organizations will go back and track as quarterly business reviews, management business reviews that happen regular manner, so that you're in line with what the business case happens. This business case is presented back to the board approves, and only when the board approves do you actually go back and start working on what do you go back and build. Then you create a playbook out of all of your decisions that you go back and say that this is what I want to go back and deliver. Once that's done, this playbook then gets designed, which means, can I work with the cross-functional teams across the organization? I finalize the design recommendations, and then I'll create an actionable playbook that I can go back and I can use that for setup. Setup is where every part of the design gets delivered. So which means you'd have made the decision on the entity. Do I want to do LLP versus PLC? Do I want to do SEZ versus non-SEZ? Do I want to be where, what kind of regulatory, mechanisms do I need to have in place? What should my talent playbook look like? Where do I want to be hiring talent from? What should my office look like? Because the offices then become visual representation or embodiment of how you want your people to be sitting in, right? It brings your business, it brings your culture to life. And once you get set up, and you typically do the operations or talent acquisition, which is you'll hire the people, you'll hire the leader, payroll gets done, your HRBP services or managing an employee queries gets done, there's a workspace that's fully functional, and then we'll work on building your brand continuously and look at continuing this entire cycle and loop so that all of your feedback loops are served. And net, what we do is, once you do all of this setup and at the end of 1 year, we go back and then evaluate and see how did you work towards your business case. And what can we do to actually go back and enhance, your services. It could be your evolution maturity, which means you've evolved, you've been in operations for a while. How does this entire benchmarking look like? Okay, you want to be building certain COEs because you don't have the capability, it's net new capability in-house. Can I build an entire pod that will give me the ability to go back and deliver against these service? Can I do everything to do with AI? Like your AI launchpad, which means I'll create a C team. That C team then can be replaced with people that I want to go back and hire. Can I go back and build AI first GCC architecture, which means the next phase, I don't have to put it on people. I can be hiring, say I want to be building a team of engineers. I could go back, instead of a 100-member engineering team, I could go back to actually build a non-linear model. I'll build a 40, 50-member engineering team and actually support them with a whole bunch of AI platforms and services. And in fact, I was sitting with a CIO the other day, and the CIO was telling me that, the AI tools are like your Iron Man suit. Has everybody watched Iron Man in the audience? Can somebody raise hands for me on who's watched Iron Man? Okay, good number of hands. So you've seen the Iron Man suit, right? He gets superpowers when he wears the suit. He can do everything that you think a normal human being can't do. That's what AI does. So if you're really good at your craft, you become X to 10X engineer. If you're not great at your craft, you struggle and you can actually break stuff. So as much as we're talking about what this does, I think companies are going back to see how can they enable people? How can we get people to move on this entire value chain and get them to do better? There's a whole bunch of innovation programs that happen, because if you look at the GCC, the centers also become great places where you can go back, get exposure to startups, learn how they do things, get ideas, evaluate and see what works for you, and then implement it back into your organization so that you could look at reverse innovation pipelines. There's learning and development that happens right at the leadership level, all the way to individual teams. In fact, we've built a leadership program for GCC leaders, especially for site and functional leaders, along with ISB. We're currently in the first cohort, and we've had some tremendous progress on creating a cohort of about 32 leaders who can truly think about what can they push the boundaries to become the next set of leaders who can go back and lead these new age GCCs. And of course, there's everything to do with, you've set up in India, can I look at a tier 2, tier 3 city? Every government now is giving, subsidies like freebies that you see in election mandate. Everyone wants you to come and set up in their state. So there is geographical expansion of what can we do across states, what can we do across regions so that you could de-risk. So for some of the things that we do, we talk about like a GCC maturity model. It's called CORE. And what we do is we take a framework which is called Constellation Framework. We look at multiple factors. It could be like your target operating model, stakeholder management. It could be about location. It can be about the nature of work. It's about the span of control that you have about the work. It could be around your policies. It could be about what do you do to influence without authority or negotiation back with your headquarters. A lot of that actually goes back to become a diagnostic platform that we've created, that we work with several of our clients to tell them that this is where you are and this is what great looks like. And the great is a journey. You don't get there on day one. But what does that journey look like, and what could be interventions that we can bring about on that journey? And that's what CORE is all about. And then as part of the enterprise playbook, if you saw, I did speak about the various ways in which we could build your business case. That is called Ascend. So which means, how do we go back, how do we create a GCC playbook that is tailored? So if you're doing micro, nano GCCs, we should not be boiling the ocean of what we do for enterprise clients, because the decision making is at a very different speed. The way you go back and operate is very lean and agile. So we shouldn't be doing things which don't help you if you're going to go back and set up. So we've designed a few archetypes. Archetypes could be the nature of work that you're going to be putting inside the GCC. It could be, is it digital? Is it going to be a global business services center? Is it going to be a center where you're going to be creating a 20, 30 member team? Is it going to be a center where you're going to have all functions? Which means when you start, you're looking at tech, and if it's a retailer, you're thinking about merchandising and supply chain. And you're talking about corporate functions like FP&A and HR shared services. Now that's what makes different types of archetypes. And then all of that, when you kind of put together and create a powerful playbook that goes to your board, typically that framework is called Ascend. Now, as like humans, companies are also extremely competitive. They want to know how can you go back and be better than what your other peers in the market are. So we constantly go back and create, as part of our quarterly business reviews as well as management business reviews, to tell you where you are and how does the rest of your competition look like, what does their talent mix look like, what are some of the things that they've been able to deliver. This is a combination of what we do with regards to using a whole host of primary services like interviews that we do with peer group and markets. When we interview candidates when they come for interviews, so you also understand tech stack and where they are. And you also look at market from a annual report, media, as well as any of the other reportings that they do as part of their organization. And some of this is extremely critical. So even if you're going to be doing this on your own, I think constantly going back and seeing where you are and where your peer group has moved is extremely critical for you to go back and chart where you want to be going as you go on the journey. And of course, the whole innovation levers. How can we go back? How can we create innovation playbooks? How can we create a pipeline? Because it doesn't have to be that innovation has to come through HQ alone. Innovation can actually go back and see what you can do from here. I'll give you an example. A recent, very large US retailer actually set up in India, and they hired a bunch of people from Blinkit, Zepto, and from Swiggy. And why? Because they've got AI models which can go back to anticipate what clients are looking for and what they'll buy. How else do you think you're getting your delivery orders in 5, 8, 10 minutes? It's not like they're hiding at your staircase in your apartment complex with all your things, but there's a pattern that you build when you go back and use the platforms regularly. And a large part of that can actually go back to be used to see what do I have to do as inventory, what do I have to do as supply chain. And a lot of that knowledge can actually go into very large retailers which have nothing to do with this market, and they will not come back to set up here. But an idea of how you can do that effectively can actually be drawn from here and implemented to change some parts of their core ways of how they go back and operate. They also have a lot of companies have accelerators, so they work with several startups, so they take up equity, or they have like a certain period of time that they go back and engage with them. So a lot of models exist, and it's fairly mainstream and mature in this market. We also look to set up COEs. Now COEs become like these very specialist or specific teams that will go back to build capability. It'll be a full stack of everything that you need. If you need to be moving to cloud, there will be people who are going to be cloud architects, analysts, engineers, PMOs, transition specialists, full stack engineers, people who will be going back and checking on security. All of that will be a pod. So you're thinking about, a super boost. Think of, you go back, you look at Shell advertising petrol or diesel, and they say they have a whole host of additives. This is your additive team. They will come back and they will supercharge your entire process when you go back and you want to engage. So these are things and teams that were able to empower, create change. They are your change agents. They'll be able to go back and build capability. For example, Delta, they have a large team of these cloud specialists, and they have been a key enabler to taking large parts of Delta Airlines applications to the cloud. So they had a mandate of about moving 180 applications to the cloud, and about 160 of those were actually, transitioned and taken to the cloud by this team within Bangalore from the Delta team. So when you have a team like that and a lean team that's super agile, highly optimized, and each of them which are behaving like a high performance team, they're able to drive outcomes at an organizational value that is super critical. Very similarly, we do, and organizations are thinking about AI Center of Excellence. How do you go back? And if I go back and think about right across strategy to delivery to, innovation as a platform, how do organizations, how can you think about working across all of these? And and how there will be one view and one platform to actually go back and deliver. Now, large parts of this is also based on governance, and each of these teams actually go back to build very specific governance teams so that they are in line with regulated industries. I know that companies like ANZ are building highly governance models so that they are able to create the right kind of checks and balances before they can take AI mainstream. And they're also going back and taking a view of, do we need AI here? Or can we go back and deliver a great service to our clients without adding further steps of unnecessary AI or agentizing, a platform or any of that? And of course, you need everything has to happen from a talent perspective. GCCs are huge proponents of taking, contract staffing on board. You don't need to, it's like any enterprise. If you don't want to hire them, you don't need to hire them. Then you should either be looking at, should we work with a service provider? Should we work with a contractor who can give you, just that enough power or firepower that will take you? If you go back and look at retailers or, banks, there are certain months in a year that are really high volume months. So you don't need to be adding your teams to be upsizing and downsizing your teams, but instead you're thinking about, can I get in teams which are highly, in performance-wise they do really well, but they're able to go back and they're able to deliver. I know I'm against time, and I have a few slides, and I can have the slides available to people. But broadly, I thought this is a key area that we should talk about in terms of when you're looking to scale. I think there are a few parameters that are extremely critical for you to go back and look at and see where you want to be, and having them as your key factors. It could be either with how do you go back and as organizations align, are you strategically aligned to the broader mandates that you have as an organization? Do you then have access to talent? Because the way GCCs are looking at today is, I want to go where the talent is. I'm not building on traditional models that I will build because this role needs to be in the country. I gave you an example of Target's marketing function, and you saw that an SVP of marketing is actually sitting here in India. So it's about going where the talent is and building where the talents are. It's about being compliant to regulatory and statutory compliances that we have in the country. It's also ensuring that you're able to contain risk. You're not having all eggs in one basket in one city, but should we go back and consider multi-city, multi-countries to create your right kind of risks? Also ensure that you've got the right kind of redundancy from an infrastructure perspective, as well as ensuring you've got access to an ecosystem. We're talking about cultural and collaboration fit, which is equally important because you've got teams that work across shores. How do you work with your global US teams? How do you work with your other teams so that you're able to go back and create a one team or across shores but one team approach? And last but not the least, a topic that's very close to my heart is, a lot of times, I know as finance, and this is something that doesn't come naturally to a lot of us sitting in this audience, is about how do you build a brand? If you don't build a brand, if you don't create connections, if you don't go back and create oneness and a pull and an attractiveness to what you want the teams to do or how you can go back and deliver, how do you then go back and create this one team or able to attract and retain talent? So it's an important topic, it's critical. It helps you hire the right kind of teams. It helps you, encourages you to actually look at a shorter time when you're looking to attract talent. It helps you with retention. And of course, it helps you with, creating better employee morale. And with this, I think I've gone through everything that I wanted to say from a different value lever perspectives that you could use and look at right from setup to you've built a GCC and how you're looking to scale. So thank you for patiently listening to me, and I hope it wasn't too much of a bore, and there's some things that you could take back from here. Thanks.
Definitely not, madam. It was indeed a wonderful session, and definitely very impressive when it comes from the managing director of ANSR. Thank you, Smita madam, for giving a wonderful insight about GCC. And now I call upon CA Pramod Hegde to escort Shalini Sankarshna, the Managing Director of PlanView India Private Limited, on the dais.
Ms. Shalini Sankarshana is the Managing Director of Plainview India Private Limited, a seasoned software product leader with nearly 25 years of experience in scaling enterprise platforms. At Plainview India, she has led the creation of high-performing, multifunctional teams, resulting in several Plainview products being fully owned and operated from India. She quickly matured the Plainview Capability and Innovation Center, CIC, into a strategic hub. Shalini is an active member of NASSCOM and Regional Council for Karnataka, and is a dedicated mentor championing gender diversity in technology. She is previously drove the expansion of the security processing business at Broadbridge Financial Solutions.
Thank you for accepting and coming here, madam. We have CA Pramod Hegde, the moderator, is a founding partner of RPAR & Co., bringing over 2 decades of extensive experience in assurance and advisory service. His career includes an impactful 8 years tenure with a leading Big Four firm, where he led the complex audit and advisory engagement across diverse industries such as hospitality, telecom, real estate and construction, pharma, and information technology. A recognized expert in international financial control, Ind AS implementation, multi-gap consolidation, due diligence for listed and unlisted companies, and internal audit. Pramod has previously served as a chairman of Bangalore branch of ICAI, and he is also currently a chairman of Students Committee SICASA of SIRC, and also a chairman of Accounting, Auditing, and Ethical Standards Committee. We welcome even CA Pramod Hegde for this session. Thank you. Over to Pramod Hegde as a moderator.
Of course, I did start with my opening remarks. Let's not waste anyone's time. Madam, I think I would like to call you on to dais. I'll probably come back for the moderation for the questions from the audience.
Good afternoon, everyone. And I was just telling Smita, my job is very easy. She's done all the hard work. She's shared everything that we all do. I was just telling her the reflection is this. Sometimes we don't step back and see how many things we do at GCCs. But this is a really, really critical opportunity for some of us to come and talk to you all. Because I think the relationship between the CA community and GCC community is always in 1 or 2 intersection points only. Here, I think we have an opportunity to share where we stand. So this will be I've been asked to do a short session. I will keep it short, but I genuinely took a very different approach to this conversation, because I know over the last 1.5 days, you've heard a lot of themes, a lot of information. So what I'm trying to share here is probably 2 perspectives. One is how has been the so-called GCC itself as a phenomenon and our growth. You've again heard this from several leaders. You saw it in the models that Smita spoke about. But through that lens, how are we changing what we believe is success for us? Because the reason I thought if we share that, then this community could become the architects of how this success could look like. So that's the intention. So there are ideas here, and there are perspectives, very little content, very, very little statistics, because I know for the last year, 1.5 days, you've heard enough of statistics. Hopefully this works. So we are calling GCCs, I mean, you would have heard the word value used in the framework of GCCs a lot. The reason that's become important is till now, value has been defined in many ways. If you look at your audit, the first value differentiation is how much cost are you saving, which is not at all bad. It's a very, very important driver for a parent entity to start GCC. But today, it is not about the start alone. Once you start, once you are part of an organization and you are here, what do you really do? Are you just executing functions? Okay, then the AI comes. Then what do? You build an AI pod. And do what? So we focus so much on what do we do, the inputs, activities, and tasks. The biggest shift we all are going through, both at a leadership level and at the team levels, is why are we doing this? And how do we do it differently? And the doing differently is not coming because we are bored of doing the same things. It is coming because the world is changing. The world is changing, industry is changing, markets are changing. A lot of these changes are not very well structured. It's just hitting every organization. Okay? We all may come across as we exactly understand what the changes are and we exactly have a plan how to do it. It's really not true. At even the most largest organizations today, from Google's to the big techs or biggest of the corporations, there is a constant churn of thought. There is a constant unrest going on as to, one is how do I stay afloat in my business? Second is how do I continue to grow? And when I grow, it cannot be incremental growth. What I did for the last 10 years will no longer work in the next 10 years is a reality, not just for technology organizations, for every organization. And the reason I see this, similar to how Smita mentioned, part of what PlanView does is what we call as portfolio management. I have a unique opportunity to look at every organization, every sector. We work across multiple sectors. And change and transformation is so real, so real. So with that, we also, this is something which we internally talk about, and I think it's the right way to think about. GCCs is not just an extension of a foreign organization here. What we're really doing here is we're making in India for the world. And it has several, if you think about it, making in India, talking of talents, capabilities, we are building world-class products which we can export to the world. We are talking of market access. All of this you need for any Make in India. So that's how we think of ourselves as GCCs, not just another extension of an organization. So with that, this is the big idea. So GCCs were always, in the past and even now, some sort of a back office. What is back office? Nothing wrong in back office. Without back office, there is no office that exists. But what is back office? Essentially, all the tasks all the activities that you would think are not core and somebody else can do, you send it. Was the fundamental construct it started with. And at one point in time, there was no difference between sending it to your own GCC versus sending it to a third-party vendor in India. Even today, a lot of global organizations don't really still understand what is the power of having your own GCC versus sharing with. The reason I brought this up is a lot of activities, especially when you think of this community in GCCs would be doing, somewhere would be looked at as back office back then. But at this point, what has really happened is because we're talking so much about value, the whole idea of, okay, I can be comfortably in back office and still succeed is no longer valid. That's a big change, because it's a big change not just for the people, for the leadership, and also how we build teams and how we build systems. The comprehensive model that Smita spoke about, that evolved because the need is different now. The need is not just about, okay, I'll hire 100 engineers and 50 accountants. The need is, okay, I want to generate X amount of efficiency, I want to generate Y amount of velocity in my whatever I'm doing. Let's say I'm exporting products, let's say I'm building automotives. So I want to either increase production, bring in brand new models. These are the outcomes, right? And for those outcomes, what kind of teams and capabilities you need is the conversation, which is very different from, like I said, like hire 100 engineers, build a campus. So with that, when I was thinking about this session and this community, the analogy that came in was for this traversal to happen, this community could be the ignition system. I'll tell you what I mean by that. So in a way, all of us are going through a weight loss transformation. Okay? So what does it mean? My understanding of weight loss, I am not a doctor, but my understanding, we all need to understand, is two things are happening, right? One is we are all continuously under stress. We talked about there are external stresses, markets are changing. You have new government leaders coming in with brand new government mandates. We have our US mandates, which is changing the entire world's geopolitics. You have Europe operating differently. You have Asia operating differently. Within our own country, our central versus state operates differently. So each of this is a stress factor to a business. Second stress factor, new technologies come. Okay, there's no big deal in new technologies. But a technology like, again, AI. AI has been there for the last at least 3 decades, for some of you who don't know. But what it has done today, where it has reached, is it's completely making people question the fundamental nature of a business. Why do, for example, at one point, the question used to be, okay, how many people in your team if you're a GCC? Today, that question is highly relevant. You could have 100 people team, and you could be helping support $1 billion business. So what does that mean? It has changed the way job market is. It's changed the way business models is. It is changing the way you have defined your own P&L statements. Okay? So that's a second stress. The technology is making business change, which was not as apparent in the past unless you had some big spikes. The third change is, through all of this, brand new incumbent players are coming. More than a decade ago, you never had an Uber in the mix, did we? We had cars, that was a business. We had a driver community, an unstructured business. We had taxis going around. Did we ever have a multi-billion-dollar business like Uber in the past? We had hotels. Did we ever have things like Airbnb and Oyo? So, and today, did we ever have a Blinkit or a Zepto? Which means there are new incumbents coming, changing the entire expectation of what the audience looks for. With that, the business have changed. So think of these three as your main categories of stress factors. Internally, what's happening, all of this is affecting. Then we have internal turmoil, because you have to catch up to these. You have growth aspirations in your own business, which means you have to do something either differently or something bigger or something adjacent. On top of it, you have expectations of your own teams, and you are going global, because if you want to be globally distributed companies, you can't sit in one economy or one geography anymore. Applies to us too. A lot of Indian corporations today are building global GCCs. It's not just the other way around. So with all these external, internal stress factors, cortisol is building up. For people who don't understand what is cortisol is a stress hormone that builds up in our body. What cortisol does is, it doesn't matter if it's a good stress or a bad stress, it just builds up, and once it builds up, a few things happen. Fat starts building up. Because your nervous system is tuned to say that, oh, a danger is coming. So start storing whatever you're eating. That's why fat builds up, okay? Same thing is happening in organizations. All these stresses are coming, few behaviors are coming together. One is, as we account or as we build our financial models, we start becoming protectionist. We look at models, how do we save our businesses? How do we save our jobs? How do we save our, we're not looking at the broader organizational construct or business construct. How does this affect what we do? I'll talk to you about it. Second thing that's happening is, through all of this, the old business models want to stay intact because there's a fear of failure in the new. With that, who can actually bring that change? Not the same folks who are sitting and doing this for 25, 30 years, right? You need a brand new energy, which is also creating an impetus for the amount of GCCs, ANSR, etc. bringing in, because there's a real need for new thinking and new talent. And some of this new cannot happen without this. So in my mind, when I was thinking of that analogy, that's exactly what's going on with organizations and businesses today. And there's so much fat getting built up. And that cutting fat is at the core of the GCC evolution. And today, people are not asking, this is how you should cut the fat. They're saying, cut the fat. You tell me how do you do it. That's the change in cost to value game, okay? Which means all of us in the room who want to be part of any of this have to be the thinkers, not just the doers. Each of our own job roles, we have to be rethinking how do we build that. I continue with this theme. So when I think of CAs, I'm giving you all a new job. I'm calling you all nutritionists. Because one of the biggest trends I have seen in this community as I've engaged is, you have a unique knack of identifying waste. While you focus on tactics and techniques, but what you really do is you're spotting waste. And you're also spotting waste getting accumulated in illegal, unethical ways, and you're saying, cut it. That's your superpower. I think we have to now turbocharge it. So you've got to spot empty calories, right? All the milkshakes we drink. You have to start report, not just generating things which no one reads because it's statutory. You have to start being those voices to tell us, the entire business, what is really going on in the organization. You have to kill sugar highs. This is a favorite, right, in any dietitians. First thing we start with is a high sugar drink. Last thing we end our day is a high sugar drink. Some of the analogies would be highly reactive process. We have built process for the last 15 years. We have 20 years worth of, this is how we did it, this is how my manager did it, this is how my grand manager did it, and now I have to do it. Is the biggest fat we have. How do we kill that? How do we start with a kill process before adding? I think that's the biggest thing we all have to learn as lesson. How do you really prescribe governance not to stop growth, but to really push the growth in those 1 or 2 directions which gives you maximum returns. So we can continue on these themes, but if you really think about it, that's exactly what this role and this community has to turn to. I continue with this theme. I started putting some metrics around it. So if you were to do a weight loss, you would look at how much muscle are you building up. That's exactly what we're talking of, how much value are we delivering per FTE. Today, the measures that we have, right? How much does it cost? What is the salary? What are the costs? What are the facility costs? Okay? And then what is the attrition rate? And you build up a number and say, this is what it takes for me to have a India member. But is that what we need to do? For example, in my own organization, when we were building the GCCs, the amount of people who asked me in the last 3 years, oh, how many people in your team? I abhor that question. I start with, okay, we are close to $1 billion organization, and we support about $500 million from India. People don't get that construct, because now we are going down in terms of truly delivering value per FTE. It's a very, very big eye-opener for all of us, because in India, that number of employees is a very, very important metric, even from socio-politically. It's not just as an organization, but that is changing. And that what you measure is what matters. That's why I'm bringing this up. And it's a very real reality. Not all of us want to hear it. We talk of automation as yet another nice thing. It's no longer a nice thing. I think Smita gave a good example. When we talk of AI pods, you're no longer talking of, and AI pods are not something separate on the side. They are now core into your organization. Those pods are not coming with humans alone. You have part humans, a big part of agents. That's a reality. This is no longer science fiction. Which means you now have digital employees in the mix. Which means you have to start building and billing and costing and measuring. What does that actually look like? That's your metabolism. Thank you. And fundamentally, what is coming up? Data is the power in this room, correct? So how do you build data to insights to really build speed? I think is going to be the biggest lever. So we talked of the stress. So we now are in that movement of fat to abs. So we've got to start trimming the amount of reactive processes, amount of bureaucracies, amount of approval matrices, amount of meeting deaths that we call. And I put it as 6-pack. It need not be 6-pack, any amount of pack you can. But eventually, data has to speak the story. Data is now becoming the overall muscle of the organization, not just for reporting alone. That's the mindset that we need to look at. I'm also calling you guys as personal trainers. So I'll quickly push to how do we look at, so just to redefine some of the things that we spoke about. Some examples were given in the previous session as well. Today, what we are doing is not just an extension of existing teams. We are globally engineering products from here, end to end, running them here, and pushing it to the world. We're globally managing risks, globally managing entire business accounting functions, globally managing the entire cash reserves of the organizations, globally certifying what the value stories are. So if you really think what kind of change that's happening is, while we are becoming the new engine, you're all the ones who can keep us truly lean and push velocity. So in summary, we talked of nutritionists, we talk of metabolic rate, how do we increase it? Because what gets measured gets managed. We talked of how do you identify and manage corporate cortisols, and how do you truly drive apps transformations. If anybody's in HR here, these are some of the roles I thought about for this community. We really need architects of governance, not just people who do governance. We look for interpreters of risk. We want CAs and CFOs to be storytellers of the business. And for that, you need to understand the entire business and see where the value is. So I'll leave this here, and thanks again. And truly appreciate this opportunity, and thank you, Prabodh.
Thank you for those wonderful insights. I think we'll take some questions from the audience when we have James Bond on the stage, so I think we should not let this opportunity to go. Before I take up audience question, I myself have a question. Any of the audience can take this up. We are considering CA fraternity, where we work in isolation. We have our, ecosystem designed in a such a way where there's the sole proprietorship or partnership concern. So if a partnership firm decides to have its own GCC, or they dedicate this one person's team to have this GCC built up, how do you look into this nano GCCs? What are the opportunities of scaling up? And secondly, the domains which you think is a great niche area to concentrate.
Thanks, Pramod. So typically we've seen, like the way Pramod mentioned in his opening, we've seen about a 680 odd micro nano GCCs that have been set up post-pandemic. So which means think last 4 years and think about the significant number. What this means is that organizations are now looking at setting up, even in the nano GCCs, about 20 to 25% of their corporate headcount here. They are thinking, can I start with technology? Can I start setting up some of those teams? Can I go back to think about, say, finance regulatory process or risk assessment? Can I build some of those small pods here which can truly help my organization? They're also thinking, can I build some of my corporate functions? It could be like FP&A. It could be like HR shared services, legal, procurement, secretarial services. Can I build some of them? And they don't have to be 50, 100 member teams. They can be 3, 5, 7, 10 member teams. So typically we've seen, good adoption from the usual suspects, which is BFSI and retail CPG, kind of taking the first plunge. But we're seeing a whole host of manufacturing, traditional companies like construction, which we never thought will come and set up their operations here. It could be areas like retail, travel, logistics, which we thought will take a long, time to, actually build this maturity. But we've seen across the board, companies are willing to actually come back and, look at this model, because access to talent in developing economies have gotten very hard. Second is, some of these tier 2, tier 3 companies or smaller companies, if I want to use, say, sub $1 billion, right up to, portfolio companies or PE firms, which could be $30, $50 million companies which have gotten Series A, Series B funding. They don't have access to talent at scale at a cost that is, that works for them. Or they work with very small service providers which also don't help them transform. So a good way for them to rethink their entire model is, can I create like some value engines? How do I go back to use Monjaro or any of your other fat burning capsules to break down cortisol and actually bring these teams that can truly start adding value? That's what we've seen with nano GCCs.
Thank you, ma'am. Can we have the questions open for the audience?
Hello, my name is Arun. I'm a practicing chartered accountant. My question is around process. And I am amazed at how these software companies, they build huge setups and they have very good teams, like they have standard operating procedures for each function. When it comes to setting up a process, is there any best practice or any kind of rule book that we can go to say that, okay, this is where you can build your best practices from? Because if I go to the Netflix model, Reid Hoffman in his book stated that they don't have any process. They say that you have to run the complete company as if you own the company. The question is, and how do you kind of continuously improve your process to make sure that you are automating the process? How do you kind of set it up as a cadence so that you continually improve your process? Thank you.
Thank you for that question. I don't think Reid Hoffman talks about not having a process. So I'll tell you, our language can be confusing sometimes. So what we speak about tech organizations is, do not be burdened by process, which means that do not start with, this is my rule book, this is my SOP, and I will execute on the SOP. That's fine, you start there maybe, because you need a starting point. If you are an existing business, if you're a brand new business like a Netflix, or let's say I'm starting Netflix today, would you still not identify what the core functions are, what's my core business model is? I would probably act as a startup, but you would have a process. So I want to just clarify that we do not operate without a process. Having said that, we continuously, constantly try to push the process bottleneck out. It's a DNA. Because when you are only following SOP, you are limiting yourself to just thinking that. And I talked of the amount of changes that's happening, which you can't do, right? You can't afford not to think about, is this process even relevant or making sense to me? That is the dichotomy you see. But without having a standard set of steps, you're absolutely right. You cannot automate, you cannot bring in technology. So the way it works typically is you go through minimum these 3 phases. You start with a discovery / initiation phase where you identify the high-level functions, high-level people, then you look at what are the process blocks. You start there. Then as you stabilize, you start realizing what steps need to continue, what needs to evolve. It's a living thing that happens. As you do that is where you have the whole continuous improvement process that's coming. So you'll have a mutualization kind of a process, which is, I'm doing 2 things, they look almost the same, can I merge them? I'm doing 2 things which are completely opposite, but they're supposed to drive the same outcome, can I kill this? So this is a constant exercise that runs. As we do this is where you're not just looking at automating, but you don't want to automate the wrong thing. So that's where you continuously keep a check of, is this the right thing for me today? I think that's a very important thing. The process could have been okay 10 years ago, but it does not serve my purpose anymore. As we do that, we automate. And today with what agents are coming in, agents essentially is English word agency, which means agency. These agents have a fairly more independent way of thinking. They're not just doing what you're asking them to do. You're giving those AI agents an outcome. So what it does is starts rethinking whether this process is relevant. It's like archiving, I have 10,000 Slack channels. I'm probably accessing 10 channels. Do you want the rest of the 9,900? So this kind of activity keeps happening. So short answer to your question, there is a process. The process keeps getting evolved. And as it evolves, some gets automated. Of course, there's statutory and compliance, which you cannot touch. But anything beyond that, you're constantly evaluating if it makes sense.
Hi, my name is Uttam.
Sorry,
Yeah,
we
this is
can't.
here. Okay, maybe just a second.
Oh, hi, yes.
Hi, I'm just kind of wondering, do we have any SME offering for PlanView in India? As in like something which is kind of integrable, ready integrated with say Tally or some of the smaller ERPs that are kind of working across here in India. For smaller businesses, particularly say 5 crores, 10 crores kind of a thing, and then kind of scaled up as they kind of go up. So any particular offering around PlanView?
PlanView for SMEs, right?
Yeah.
Today, we are generally an enterprise solution. So the way we integrate with anybody and everybody, we have a huge integration layer. But when it comes to truly SME, the sizes that you're talking about, there are a certain set of solutions that we absolutely have, which can work, and they are like self-setup. You don't even need enterprise level connection. We can talk more offline.
Sure, thank you.
But we operate generally in large enterprise space.
Okay. Any particular metric for large enterprise as well as to like, just to kind
I
of...
have a whole
can you
matrix
take
I
this
can
on
share with you
offline, sir,
offline.
please?
Yeah. Thank you, speakers. Of course, I know she has a flight to catch, and she just did come for this session. She came from Kerala, and she is just attending session, and she has to fly to US. Thank you for this. And of course, from your session, we understand that, of course, your PPT, which talked about the nutritionist role, chartered accountants as a nutritionist role, I know the mindset which requires to change. We are always behind our reports. The reports are more like empty calories that no one reads. And every day we are on sugar highs, which means we are already on the firefighting mode, on the day mode, starting till evening. I think the shift which is required is that we need to be more of a performance manager, creating governance and automation, where I think that's the protein, if I put the way right. And this is the mindset which we need to change. And I understand the synergies what globally is looking at us, and India's GCCs are the new word engines. And these engines need discipline, decision clarity, and the good dashboards, of course, with the use of technology. Thank you very much. Thank you for this session.
I now request CA Pramod Hegde to present a memento as a token of our heartfelt appreciation.
thank you, Smita Hemige, the Managing Director of ANSR. And we also thank Shalini Sankarshna, the Managing Director of PlanView.